In the very first Polish language encyclopedia, the entry for horse begins simply, "A horse is a horse." It's obvious. Here, this cake has the same degree of ubiquitous familiarity, to the point where finding historical information on it is a little difficult. So, writing this video has been sort of like the Slavic equivalent of researching the origins and optimal recipe for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in America. So, short story long, this cake is the culinary equivalent of a PB&J recipe combined with a 1700s Polish horse.
My horse is amazing, give it a lick.
Kanapka z masłem orzechowym I dżemem.
As with every recipe I research, I reached out to my contacts across Eastern Europe and asked for feedback. And waffle cake was the first dish I've ever made a video on where I received universal positive feedback. It seems like in Slavic countries, and specifically in Ukraine, this was a cherished childhood treat. You know, sort of like those rare blessed occasions when you would successfully verbally extort your mom into taking you to McDonald's as a child.
We got McDonald's, hamburgers, McDonald's.
While this dish likely originated in Austria and has been around for well over a century, it really found its home in post-Soviet Eastern Europe, where poverty and shortages were rife. In the grim economy of the 90s, there were two ingredients that were readily available and affordable: waffle wafers and condensed milk. Combining these created a sweet, creamy confectionery concoction that resulted in a Soviet-style dessert that was apparently like edible for kids of that generation.
Oh, tight, yeah! Blue, yellow, pink, whatever, man, just keep bringing me that.
So get ready to enjoy this nostalgic, low-effort Slavic Kit Kat cake and possibly rock the sweet tooth right out of your head, because today we're making waffelny tort. To make the optimal and most traditional version of waffle cake, you will need waffle wafer sheets, softened butter, boiled condensed milk, aka dulce de leche, and walnuts. In a pinch, all you really need is boiled condensed milk and waffle wafers. We will want to whip the condensed milk to make it a bit more spreadable for when we layer the cake. For those who don't know, boiled condensed milk is just condensed milk that has been, you guessed it, boiled down. This concentrates the flavor and caramelizes the milk fats to create a richer, denser, and more complex flavor than just standard condensed milk. Whisk in a bowl or use a stand mixer until the caramel is softened. Then we add our butter. You can use the caramel milk goo as is, but to improve the texture a bit and help balance the otherworldly sweetness of the cake, we will mix 500 grams of caramel with about 100 grams softened butter, giving the cake a bit of a savory richness and adjusting the consistency of the condensed milk. Once the butter is fully incorporated and you have a viscous cream, you can start assembling your cake. Your waffle wafer should be thin, firm, and reminiscent of cheap factory-made ice cream cones more than an actual waffle. Slightly pliable and feel a little bit like packing peanuts. You will need a base to build your cake on. I happen to have a perfectly shaped cake coaster, but you can use a plate, a cutting board, cake stand. Just build it on something mobile. A dollop of cream at the base will help keep your cake from slipping, but it's not needed. Now just slather each layer with your cream. Don't stress about getting a perfectly even coating or taking the cream to the exact edge of the waffle. This will kinda sort itself out later. The layers should be thoroughly covered, but not to the point where you cannot see the texture of the waffle sheet. The dimples should still be visible and not completely filled with cream. unless you are a slave to your inner 7-year-old and you want to make this sweetest, creamiest version of this cake possible, then hey, go nuts. After coating the top of your waffle, very firmly press the next waffle layer on top, and then do it again. Less than 7 layers would be too few, and more than 14 would be too much. I am also icing the sides of the cake to better complete the illusion that this is a cake and not edible Legos, but it's not needed. However, I think that it's worth the extra effort, and who doesn't love coating their entire kitchen in sticky caramel syrup, resulting in what feels like a crime scene following an encounter with diabetic Spider-Man. Once you have your final layer ready, do not coat the top. At this point, the cake will spend some time in the fridge, under weight, to cool the cream and thicken the texture, and to allow the waffles to soak up the moisture to create a more cake-like texture. I happen to have a weight on hand that fit perfectly over the cake, but you can use a cast iron skillet, a bowl filled with water, or a stack of all those weight loss cookbooks you are certainly not using. Let refrigerate for at least 2 hours, but overnight would be great as this cake really benefits from this marinating. While your cake is chilling under pressure, you can prep whatever toppings or additions you would like to use. Again, if you want to skip this, you can, but we're going to be a bit extra here. Chopped nuts are a traditional old-school topping, but any nut would really work. In fact, anything that would feel at home on an ice cream toppings bar would likely go great here. Once the cake has been cold pressed, we can add the final touches. I advise rolling the cake in your toppings, coating the sides, for both visual presentation and to give the cake different textures and flavors. For the top, I lightly dusted the entire cake with walnuts by knocking the smallest bits of chopped walnut from a colander. Also, I created a hearty ring of toppings around the outer rim of the cake with the thicker walnut chunks. Now your cake is done. Congratulations! You have now successfully made the most beloved post-Soviet sweet from the Slavic world. But in this case, it's more accurate to say you have built, not baked, this cake. So if you have a friend or partner from Ukraine and you want to impress them,
build her a cake or something.
And there it is. A cake that is about as complex as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with shockingly simple and common ingredients that demands minimal levels of culinary competency. It is now totally obvious why this cake was universally made by busy moms to create an air of celebration at any time of year, quickly, cheaply, and easily. But while I understand why moms relied on this cake, why do kids of all ages love this cake so much? I mean, it's not that good, right? So we're finally done with our lazy cake, if you can even call this a cake. I think that it's closer to Legos than it is to baking, but I think that I've sufficiently churched this up a bit to make it a bit more presentable, and then to also sort of add additional complexity to it. With this, I just stuck to sort of more traditional ingredients, but you can do a lot of stuff with this, especially in terms of what's on top. You can put coconut, dried fruit, melted chocolate, chopped chocolate. Really feel free to experiment. So in the different layers, you can put peanut butter, marshmallow, jams, jellies, different sauces, and things like that. So this sort of lends itself quite well to experimentation. But this is more traditional. Just the nuts, the butter, the boiled condensed milk, and then the wafers. So also when sort of researching and putting this together, this sort of reminded me of a stroopwafel? I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I've had these before, but I don't really remember what they were like. It sort of didn't leave much of an impression on me. So we're going to try that. But as is the way, we're going to hot tea on the thigh. We're going to steam this over tea. So you can see kind of similar in terms of the texture, and then there's also like a caramel inside. So I think that these are going to be exceptionally comparable. All right, so I have not had this cake actually because in my early days here in Ukraine, I had the Kiev cake, so Kievsky tort, and really didn't like it, and this seemed a little too similar to that, so I just sort of avoided it. Plus it looks odd. So maybe this is delicious. It seems more interesting than the Kievsky tort. It's a little softer, even though it's made of similar things, and there's really no pastry element to it. So I guess we'll just give this a try. Ooh, gooey. Yum, yum. It smells awesome. The combination of sort of the waffle, the nuts, and then the caramel with the butter, it really creates this kind of cool, I don't know, like funnel cake caramel smell to it. It smells kind of like a carnival treat. So I guess we're going to give this a go. Cheers, guys. Wow. So it tastes really good, but it's so sweet.
I don't care for cake. Too sweet. Now.
As I was layering this, I was worried that I was putting too little of the cream in between each of the layers, because some people put extremely thick layers inside it. But I'd heard that you sort of want to keep it kind of thin because it will seep in, and I'm really glad that I kept it towards the thinner side in terms of the cream layers. But I do have to say, I like this more than the Kiev cake. The Kiev cake was really dry and super crunchy. I didn't like the texture. I like the flavor of the Kiev cake, but the texture was off-putting. This is actually pretty cool. I like this. So we're going to try this from the back side because there's sort of a greater density of nuts here and then a little bit less cream. So it should be a better ratio. That's much better. A little bit less cream, a little bit more of the nuts. I think that a sort of a less sweet filling or alternating layers with something not quite as saccharine would really help this. Maybe sort of like an unsweetened jam or maybe even peanut butter. Not that peanut butter is not sweet. But this is actually good. I enjoy it. I do need some tea because I need to cut that sweetness. So yeah, this is a dessert that I can absolutely see why everyone has really positive memories of it. It's a cool texture. It's very sweet, but not in a way that sort of disgusts me. And I could imagine being an 8-year-old and absolutely losing my mind having this. Especially if you take into consideration sort of what was available in sort of that post-Soviet sphere. This is when it was the most popular, sort of in the early to mid-90s. So this would have been just an incredible treat for people from that period. So now to compare with the Dutch. Oh, it's a really cool cinnamon flavor. I think that a bit of cinnamon would actually help this because it's super caramel. Yeah. So if anyone is from America or knows about a cereal called Cinnamon Toast Crunch, as the cereal sort of gets towards the end and it's a little bit soggy, that's kind of what this tastes like. Really chewy for some reason. And very cinnamon and sweet without too much else. Oddly, I thought this would be way better than the cake, but I prefer the cake more. So Sorry, the Dutch. I think that the Eastern European kids got you beat on this one. Alright guys, so I really hope that you enjoyed this. This one was as simple as it gets in terms of sweet treats. So feel free to experiment with this or surprise a friend from Eastern Europe with a little taste of their childhood. So thank you guys again for your time and your support. And as always, till next time. Oh, expires next year, so it's still good. I don't get it. Why is... It's just... It's like cinnamon toast chewing gum.